No. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. This oversight hearing of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs will now come to order. Today's hearing will focus upon technological incentives of the initiatives of the Veterans Benefits Administration, as well as the secondary effects of those initiatives. Specifically, we'll hear information on the status of the Veterans Benefits Management System 6.0 release and the Veterans Relationship Management System, including e-benefits. We will also address the recently implemented secure electronic transmission of service treatment records between healthcare artifacts and the image management solution of the Department of Defense and VA's VBMS. Additionally, the subcommittee will seek information on VA's work credit system within the new electronic framework of the regional offices and the national work queue, and the proposed rule of VA as it releases the proposed rule of VA as it relates to the standardized forms. Many of these new technology solutions will reduce reliance on paper-based processes and were designed to simplify and streamline the VA's services to veterans, their families, and survivors. To the extent that it increases efficiency, it will lead to faster and more accurate outputs to beneficiaries. I remain eager to work alongside the VA to implement this reasonable path forward. I am optimistic that many of the efforts the VA has employed to date have made a positive change. However, I caution that in the department's efforts to reach the numeric goal of 125 days pending for claims in 2015, VA must not prioritize an appearance of success above actual quantitative improvement. And I assure you that that this subcommittee will labor to hold the focus upon the quality of both VBA's process and outcomes. We will hear today that there have been both progress and problems. VBMS consistently experiences serious latency problems with regular, weekly, sometimes daily outages. Why do these latency issues continue, and how are the regional offices dealing with this complication? VA indicates that VBA has successfully deployed VBMS to the Board of Veterans Appeals. I believe that to be true and at a superficial level, but I am aware of the functional quagmire of VBMS and BVA. If we take your statements at face value, it would appear that BVA is productively chugging along with no problems. However, we know that BVA does not have the necessary functionality that in VBMS for indexing and file maintenance, and continues to experience issues with load time, misplaced documents, and again, latency. Additionally, VA's obligation to properly safeguard personal information is paramount. VA represents that it is the technology tools are accredited and secured under VA strictly security standards to combat involving cybersecurity threats. Yet in recent weeks, e-benefits was compromised to an unknown extent. The personal information of thousands of veterans was revealed, and this simply was unacceptable. It would go without saying, but I will say it nonetheless, this lack of security is of tremendous concern. One other area that we will hear about today is VA's proposed rule that would require claims to be filed on a standard form that would require appeals to be initiated using a standard form, whether one is provided for that purpose or not. Finally, we will be examining VA's transition to what it refers to as a national work queue, meaning that claims are processed by the next available VA employee, not necessarily the next local VA employee, and in particular, examining the effects of such model has on local representation. I look forward to hearing both the department's explanation of the desired change as well as the comments of the various interested organizations that are seated in our first panel this afternoon. And with that, I will begin the introductions, and with the first panel be seated at the witness table. Our first panel today will include Mr. Gerald Menard, Deputy Director of National Veterans Service with the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, Mr. Jeffrey Hall, Assistant National Legislative Director with Disabled American Veterans, Mr. Zachary Hearn, the Deputy Director for Claims, Veterans Affairs, and Rehabilitation Division with the American Legion, and Mr. Frank Lobago, the National Service Director with the Wounded Warrior Project, and Mr. Eric Jenkins, who is here in representation of the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO, and the AFGE National VA Council. Once we conclude with panel one, we will move on to panel two, which consists of representatives from the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense. For the VA, we'll hear from Ms. Diana Rubens, Deputy Undersecretary of Field Operations, accompanied by Richard Hippolyte, the Assistant General Counsel, and by Ms. Lorraine Landfried, Deputy Chief Information Officer for the Product Development Office of Information Technology. And from the Department of Defense, we will hear from Major General Richard Thomas, Director of Healthcare Operations, Defense Health Agency, who is accompanied by Mr. Dave Bowden, Director of Health Information Technology, Defense Health Agency. With those introductions complete, I thank you all for being with us today, and now yield to the Ranking Member, Ms. Titus, for her opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think some of the things I'm going to say in the opening statement echo some of the points that you've already made, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to hear them twice. This is a very important hearing, and I appreciate your calling it. I want to commend the VA for its efforts to address the claims backlog. I know last fiscal year the VA completed a record 1.7 million claims. You reduced the time veterans have to wait for their claims, and you cut the backlog by 35%. So if you continue along these lines, I suspect that at this rate you'll reach the Secretary's ambitious goal by next year. But I also want to thank the stakeholders who've joined us today, because we wouldn't be where we are in reducing the backlog if it weren't for the help that you have been giving our veterans and the advice that you gave us in the VA on how to tackle this challenge. Your help is very much appreciated by both the veterans and by us. We're confident that the VA has seen an increase in production due to some of the mandatory overtime and the implementation of provisional ratings, but results of the new electronic claim system, the VBMS, are unfortunately mixed reviews, and despite the promises that we heard of how they were going to make the system more efficient and effective. According to the Strategic Transformation Plan, the VA expected to reduce the backlog by 345,000 claims based on the efficiencies from utilizing this system alone, just because of that. We're hopeful that that occurs. However, we remain concerned about that because as VBA staff and stakeholders continue to question the efficiencies that have been gained during this system. There have been excessive downtimes, latency, lack of access to the system for the VSOs via that stakeholder enterprise portal. And these are all problems that we hope will be able to be addressed. And as the chairman pointed out, just last week we learned of yet another VBMS outage, and then a few days later the media reported that a data breach in e-benefits had led to the release of personal information for some 1,400 veterans. So needless to say, we're not overly impressed by the system's security, efficiency, or effectiveness at this point, and we're looking to see some improvements as we move forward. Adding to this challenge has been the VA's continued lack of transparency regarding the performance of specific VA regional offices. For months, the VA has shuffled claims among the ROs and then reported that the struggling offices have been improving. Now, I've dealt with this firsthand with the performance of the Reno Regional Office, which serves all the veterans in Nevada and some in California. It was one of the worst in the country, had one of the longest delays and one of the biggest backlogs. Well, now I've learned that half of their workload was brokered to other stations around the country. That work was actually completed in those other stations, but the Reno RO was given credit for reducing its backlog. Now, because of that, I wonder, and it remains unclear if the poor performers have really gotten any better, or if they're going to improve in the future, or if we are addressing the real cause of the problem and not just the symptoms. While veterans might be served in a timelier fashion through brokering, and it's a good thing in the short term, it's not a solution in the long term. It's imperative that we know not only how well our veterans are being serviced, but how well the VA regional offices that are serving them are really performing. This is particularly important as you move towards this national work queue, where many of veterans' claims will be sent to other states or other parts of the country to be worked on. Just in closing, I'd like to state that earlier this year, our subcommittee worked on a bipartisan package of bills that was designed to speed up the benefits process for veterans. The House has passed most of these bills, and I hope that the Senate will soon address them and send them to the President for his signature. Some of these will be very important as you move towards that national work queue, including my bill, Pay As You Rate, so I hope that we can work on those to provide a more timely delivery of payments. Additionally, I hope that the VA is looking towards the national work queue as a way not just of moving cases from the underperforming to places where they can be addressed more quickly, but as a way to specialize in medical conditions in certain offices that are especially challenging, like military sexual trauma and traumatic brain injury. That could be a potential game changer if you focus on specializing and not just on shuffling the chairs around. So with that, I'd like to restate and emphasize our commitment to the VA, proud of the good work that you do. I know VA employees work hard, and this is not an easy process. This committee wants to be your partner. We want you to tell us if something works, help us understand if something's not working, and then be forthright when there are problems so that we can try to address them. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Titus. And with that, I know Mr. O'Rourke does have an opening statement, but protocol says I ask Mr. Cook first. And Mr. O'Rourke's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I just ask unanimous consent to submit my opening statement for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
Ms. Nugent-McLeod, anything? Nope. Welcome our first panel, and Mr. Menard, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your oral testimony.
Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Titus, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to present to you the views of the members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and its auxiliaries on these important topics. While workload remains near historic highs and quality remains problematic for VA, these are not VA's biggest problem, in our view. What confronts VBA is a problem in leadership. Leaders at the top so intent on meeting arbitrary goals by 2015 that they have systematically suborned the legal, regulatory, and policy protections granted veterans over the last 75 years. I say this today with the full knowledge that the Veterans of Foreign Wars has largely supported this leadership as they've moved to transform the claims processing system. However, VBA policies and practices in claims processing have increasingly become hostile to the interests of veterans. Secretary Shinseki established aggressive goals for VBA in both claims processing and timeliness by declaring 125 days as the maximum time in which to process a claim with 98% quality by 2015. It appears that VA leadership long ago realized that they could not process all claims within 125 days. In the past few years, the true workload has reached over 2 million claims and appeals. Today, there are over 1.7 million compensation, pension, and education claims and appeals. Instead of fully fixing its problems, VA leaders redefined them. Since VA couldn't reduce the entire 1.7 million workload of claims and appeals to a reasonable level by 2015, they decided to define the workload as only disability claims requiring rating action. Like a mantra, they have repeated that redefinition over and over until the media and members of Congress use it when talking about the backlog. 700,000 disability claims are pending today. Just 41% of all the claims and appeals VA has to work in its regional offices. Next, VA decided to focus its entire workforce on reducing pending disability claims, leaving nearly 60% of the workload nearly untouched. The cost of this neglect is found in two examples. In the past 3.5 years, dependency claims, perhaps the simplest of claims that VA can process, have grown from about 40,000 to nearly 235,000. Because appeals do not fall within the definition of backlog, VBA has consistently diverted appeals staff to work disability claims. As a consequence, appeals have grown from 252,000 to over 268,000 in just the past year. The definition of quality has also changed in several ways. VA central office directives have relaxed development requirements to allow rating specialists to make decisions using evidence considered inadequate just a few years ago. Claims are decided faster, but often less favorably to veterans. In addition, VA is moving to an issues-based method for determining quality levels. This is significantly different than the case-based method used when Secretary Shinseki set his goal of 98% quality. The new method makes VA look better while making the same number of mistakes. What you see here is a cold-blooded assessment by VA officials that if they cannot achieve their goals under the current standards, they will change the rules to meet their goals. VA is proclaiming vast improvements when in fact they have only changed the way they look at quality. Proposed regulation AO81, styled standard claims and appeals forms, is another attempt by VA to change the playing field. We discussed this at length in our written testimony. This regulation change is not about requiring standardized forms. VA has had standardized forms since at least the 1930s. It is about reducing incoming claims and depriving thousands of veterans each year of millions of dollars in earned benefits. There will be a profound and negative effect on veterans seeking benefits if VA implements these changes. Congress has spent 75 years or more working to construct a benefit system which is veteran-friendly, a system which recognizes the contribution of the men and women who have worn the uniform of the United States. VA proposes to make rigid a claims processing system which was constructed with the purpose of helping veterans who may not know every rule and policy. VA leaders have apparently decided to ignore the injunction of Omar Bradley, administrator of the Veterans Administration following World War II, who stated, "We are dealing with veterans, not procedures, with their problems, not ours." And finally, we ask this committee to examine what VA leadership is doing, examine the methods they are using to redefine problems as they can reach their self-created artificial goals. We ask Congress to block any attempt by VA to reduce rights that veterans and other claimants currently have to submit informal claims to VA. And we ask this committee to force VA to address all pending issues and appeals, not just disability claims. America's veterans did not sacrifice their time, their bodies, or their lives to be run over by a bureaucratic train racing to declare victory by 2015. They deserve more respect than that for their service to our great nation. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Menard. With that, I'll recognize Mr. Hall for 5 minutes for his testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Titus, and members of the subcommittee. On behalf of DAV and our 1.2 million members, we appreciate the opportunity to testify today regarding VBA's technology initiatives. Let me begin today by sharing some insights from a recent unannounced visit to the Newark VA Regional Office, which is the only fully electronic regional office within the VA. All claims processing performed in Newark today is, for all intents and purposes, completely paperless. During my visit to Newark, I was able to see virtually every step of the process, from the intake processing center through the steps of the development in the core lane, concluding with the fully digital claim file being reviewed in the VBMS and a final rating being prepared in the VBMS-R program. Not having seen more than a demonstration of VBMS prior to my Newark visit, I now have greater confidence in the overall performance of VBMS, and I'm reassured that it actually works as promised. In speaking with many of the employees at the Newark VA Regional Office, morale is much higher than it was in the past, and it's growing every day. Employees I visited with feel VBMS and the new organizational model, while not perfected, allow for greater productivity, speed, accuracy, and accountability in completing their work. Albeit, they do realize there will be routine improvements in the VBMS system, and not without problem. Yet they are optimistic that as their proficiency using the new system escalates, they will be able to demonstrate the increases in all measurable activities. Recognizing the fact that no modern IT system or software is ever truly finished, it is vitally important. So in addition to the funding required for maintenance of the VBMS system, VBA must continue to make significant investments in the VBMS development for as long as this system is capable of meeting VBA needs. Like VBMS, the e-benefits system has been in place for more than a year. And while the e-benefits system is working and claims are being submitted and received electronically as intended, it is certainly not without obstacles which must be overcome as they arise and without delay. One of the first obstacles encountered within the e-benefits system was veterans not being able to set up their account due to problems with the inaccurate information maintained by the Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System, or DEERS. This remains a major problem for many veterans, especially older veterans, and must be resolved. Mr. Chairman, clearly VBA would like to see more veterans file their claims electronically, and DAV has been the leader amongst VSOs in increasing the number of claims filed electronically. However, more than a lack of interest from a veteran, it is the problem of gaining access which the veteran cannot resolve on his or her own. Simply put, if more veterans filing claims electronically is desired by VBA, then their system needs to be capable of basic matters such as access. Certainly, there are some ongoing issues with the technology. However, DAV remains supportive of VBA's transformation efforts, and veterans being able to submit claims electronically through the e-benefits system or on their behalf through the Stakeholder Enterprise Portal with the assistance of our National Service Officers. However, the SEP is dependent upon a veteran being required to have an e-benefits account, which means without e-benefits access, we cannot file electronic claims for our clients. We are hopeful that changes will occur in the near future so that we can file electronic claims directly with the VBA through the SEP system without the need of going through the e-benefits. With new technology in place, VBA is now looking at the prospect of National Workload Management Model, which we believe falls in line with similar VBA strategies such as Centers of Excellence and centralized mail centers. When considering a major change to the claims process, such as a National Workload Management Model or anything of a centralizing nature, thoughtful deliberation must be given to the impact of removing the benefit of face-to-face interaction with VBA, which at the very least could be hindered. As we have done for nearly 100 years, DAV will continue to evolve and adapt to any changes in the claims process. However, any change to the claims process must include VSOs from the earliest planning stages possible. And finally, Mr. Chairman, with respect to VA's proposal to require all claims and appeals to be filed on standard VA forms, DAV understands the stated intent of VA's proposed amendments to promote submission of claims and appeals in standard formats in order to capture data for a paperless claims and appeals system. However, we have concerns about the proposed rule and the consequential adverse effect upon veterans. To be clear, DAV takes no issue with the veterans being required to submit their claims and appeals on standardized forms. It is not new. We do, however, take exception to eliminating the informal claim process, which is also contained within the proposal, thereby causing veterans to lose their rightful entitlements, such as retroactive monetary benefits, just so the VBA can speed the process. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. With that, I'll recognize Mr. Hearn for 5 minutes for his testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Titus, and members of the committee. On behalf of our National Commander, Dan Dellinger, and the 2.4 million proud veterans serving veterans in the American Legion, I want to take a moment to thank you for bringing us here to share our views and insights about VA's technological transformation. Really, this is not a pro forma thank you, but we genuinely want to say thank you for listening. You treat us as partners. This committee recognizes that we're in a unique position to speak for what the veterans in America want. We're the voice of those veterans, and you listen to us. You think about what we have to say, and you consider our experience. You're working together with us to try to make this work for the veterans, because that's what we're all here for. We're trying to make the system work for the veterans. This is a partnership, and partnership includes dialogue. You've received our testimony, the testimony of all my colleagues, and VA's testimony. The way technology impacts the office environment for VA is going to change a lot of things. Some of those changes are going to be good. Some of those changes may not be so good. We know we're all probably going to see changes that nobody saw coming. But I've talked to veterans. I've talked to many of the over 2,900 American Legion accredited representatives throughout the country. I've talked to my colleagues here, and we can see a lot of flags that come up when we think about how some of these things will affect veterans' claims. Our voice is important. We stated in our testimony the most important factor going forward is what changes are going to make the system better for veterans. Not easier for VA, better for veterans. Is it better for veterans to force them to use an electronic process when, according to the Census Bureau, roughly half of elderly Americans, a large and vulnerable portion of the veterans' population, do not have regular internet access? Does that make things better for veterans or easier for VA? The American Legion is honored to help bring veterans to VA in a manner that makes things easier for VA. We're partners serving veterans. VA and the American Legion are partners designed to advocate on behalf of the 21 million veterans. The American Legion took the lead in promoting the fully developed claims process with veterans and enabled VA to report a reduction in how long it takes to process claims. We do the work up front and hand it off to VA. VA turns things around faster for veterans, and the veterans get their results faster. That's the ultimate win. That's why we do this. But the choice has to stay with the veteran. First and foremost, we have to make sure that any changes implemented are there to serve the veteran. VA can ensure they're making the right decisions to serve veterans by expanding the inclusion of the American Legion and other VSOs as full partners in this process. Very early on in the planning of what would later become VBMS, VA used to regularly work with the VSOs, and we were able to point out things like that early versions did not include an integrated power of attorney to ensure veterans representatives were seeing the information needed to help veterans with their claims. We worked together and helped to keep the focus on what was going to help the veteran. You've reviewed the written testimonies. You've seen some specific issues we have raised. We recognize the importance of technological advances to improve the VA claims process. However, any process implemented must be advantageous to the veteran. We appreciate VA's efforts to expedite the claims process, but it cannot be on the backs of veterans. The most important thing I want everyone here to take away from this is how important it is to recognize all of us as fully participating partners. Veterans, VSOs, VA, Congress, and to keep the goal as what's the best way to deliver benefits to veterans who have been disabled serving their country. That, more than any number or metric, needs to be the target. Again, I offer my sincere thanks for recognizing the importance of the voices of 2.4 million veterans and the greater community of veterans they serve, and for giving us a share in the dialogue at this table. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. With that, I'll recognize Mr. Logabo for 5 minutes for his testimony.
Chairman Runyon, ranking members Titus, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for holding this hearing and for inviting Wounded Warrior Project to testify today. In working daily with Wounded Warriors, we appreciate the advanced technology can bring to claims and adjudication, but the efficiency that technology delivers is not an end in itself. Fundamentally, this system must serve our veterans. Let me provide some context by reference from our most recent annual survey. With almost 14,000 responses, nearly all the warriors we surveyed were injured during post 9/11 service. Almost 60% of those injured resulted from IEDs, other blasts, and more than 44% reported traumatic brain injury. 75% of the respondents had PTSD, the most commonly reported condition. While many of our warriors rely on computers, many do not. Some with invisible wounds like PTSD, anxiety, TBI have comprehension difficulties or experience anxiety, frustration with computer technology. Many have high anxiety relating to information security. The recent data breach on VAZ Benefits website will likely heighten that concern, maybe even irreversibly. VBA must meet the veterans where they are. Technology may be the way to reach optimal efficiency, but VA's highest obligation must be to the veteran. And it must accommodate the veteran, not the other way around, even at modest cost to peak efficiency. The principle would seem beyond question and a system long celebrated as for its proclaimant veteran-friendly policy. But a recent rulemaking proposal would abandon a core tenet of that policy. Under that proposal, VA would throw out current rules that aim to minimize the burden initiating a claim and to allow benefits to be paid at the earliest possible date. It would abolish rules that permit a veteran to file an informal claim and receive benefits paid from the date of informal claim that is filed. Instead, it would push the veterans to file claims electronically and penalize those who do not. VA would levy that penalty by setting new effective date rules on benefit awards, with one rule for electronic filers and a different harsh rule for filing claims via paper. Here's how it would work. A warrior who suffers from multiple injuries from an IED would have to list specific disabilities on a claims form. If the veteran could not identify all the disabilities and simply wrote multiple injuries, VA could not consider that, would consider it as an incomplete claim. If the veteran had filed electronically, VA would preserve the effective date of filing as that date. If the veteran had submitted that same incomplete claim on paper, the veteran would be penalized by deferring establishment of an effective date until the claim becomes complete. The difference could mean a loss of thousands of dollars for that veteran. In essence, proclaimant VBA policies would abandon an attempt to achieve efficiency and speed. We certainly do not oppose VAs becoming more efficient and timely, but it must comply with the laws centered on serving a veteran. If new policy is that efficiencies trump veterans' rights, then Congress must make the judgment, not the Secretary. VA's proposal would also undermine that safeguard appellate rights. Regulations that now permit any expression of disagreement to be taken as a notice of disagreement would be discarded. Instead, veterans would have to use specific forms to file a notice of disagreement. Omitting any required information would render the veteran's notice incomplete. And a veteran who isn't able to complete a form successfully within 60 days would forfeit the right to appeal. Individually and collectively, these changes go much too far. Moreover, the department's single-minded pursuit of efficiency fails even to acknowledge that applicants for veterans benefits have a constitutionally protected property interest in their application for benefits and are entitled to due process. Rather than protecting that property interest, VA aims to establish procedures that would shrink it. And for the first time, it would create a substantive distinction between electronic and non-electronic claims. We see no basis in law to establish this two-tiered discriminatory system. In striving for efficiency, the proposed rule would create barriers that would deny veterans benefits to which they are entitled. While Congress may elect to take steps to streamline claims and appeals processes, a department charged with administering the law may not unilaterally block statutory pathways to veterans' benefits. VA describes the effect of the rules it wants to abolish as time-consuming, but Title 38, the laws VA administers, say nothing about speed. VA's statutory authority to establish online tools to facilitate claims and processing is not in doubt. Its authority to develop standard forms is not questioned. Many veterans may find online tools helpful, but VA goes too far in trying to establish procedures that will result in veterans losing benefits to which they're entitled. In the final analysis, the Secretary's duty is to administer the law, not to rewrite it. Several important interests are at stake here. The first is adherence to the law. The second is preserving pro-claimant adjudication system. The third is protecting veterans who, for a reason, including disability, hardship, remoteness, or fear they don't have online access to a computer, cannot reasonably be expected to communicate through that modality. And finally, preserving congressional prerogatives. Given the importance of each of those interests, we ask the subcommittee to press the VA to withdraw its proposed rulemaking. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Logobo. With that, I'll recognize Mr. Jenkins for 5 minutes for his testimony.
Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Titus, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to share views, discuss our concerns, and provide recommendations regarding the VBMS implementation on behalf of AFG members working daily processing these claims. I am a rating specialist at the Winston-Salem Regional Office, where I worked for the past 9 years. I'm a disabled Marine and a combat veteran who served during Operation Desert Storm, Enduring Freedom, and Iraqi Freedom. I have a deep personal and loyal commitment to serving veterans. I work with VBMS and VBMSR on a daily basis. The constant latency, technical issues, and frequent VBMS shutdowns make it difficult for me and others to serve veterans accurately and effectively. In the last week, the VBMS systems were shut down for more than a day, and VBMS was restarted 4 other times during the week. Because I work in a completely paperless system, all the work I had completed during the day was now inaccessible until the system restarted. AFGE recommends the formation of an ongoing stakeholder work group to allow AFGE and veteran service organizations to work with management to address these serious implementation issues. VBA employees, many of whom are veterans themselves, are deeply committed to completing claims as quickly and accurately as possible for our brothers and sisters who serve so honorably. But during these shutdowns, the employees I speak of, many managers not give them excluded time needed, even though they are already facing intense production quotas, performance improvement plans, and possible termination. Excluded time is a long-standing policy in VBA that not only protects employees, but also ensures that they have the sufficient time to focus on their work serving veterans. AFGE recommends that VBA work with all the stakeholders to develop an effective contingency plan for VBMS shutdowns. Improvements to VBMS go hand in hand with fixing VBA's current work credit system. I am a current member of the National RVSR Performance Standards Work Group, which is a joint venture with both management and labor that created the most recent RVSR standards. The current work credit system creates performance standards that are arbitrary, inconsistent, and focus too much on quantity over quality. VBA has never had a formal work credit system based on actual data that reflects the amount of time required to process specific types of claims and their components. Given VBA's current transformation strategy, AFGE believes that the timing is ideal for a time motion study to be created formal work credit system. AFGE recommends that the committee adopt an approach similar to the one proposed by S 1982 to form a stakeholder work group to overhaul the current system. AFG also should have a more meaningful role in the implementation of Veterans Relationship Management Initiative. It is always good policy to include employees' perspectives in any new initiatives. AFGE has not been given the opportunity to contribute to this implementation. We also recommend better integration of DoD's file system named HAMES for greater ease in transmitting medical evidence between DoD and VA for claims processing. AFGE remains cautious regarding VBA's national work queue strategy, including the methods VBA will use to assign work. If an office is considered underperforming by VBA, there are concerns that they will now be starved for case. Employees in these offices may lose certain essential skill sets if they are deprived of special issue cases. We were pleased to hear of the Undersecretary Hickey's commitment to improving VBA's current resource allocation model so that struggling ROs are not arbitrarily deprived of resources. Therefore, we urge the committee to review the current resource allocation model and encourage VBA to expedite reforms, especially in light of the rollout of any national work use strategy. Finally, AFGE is very troubled by a recent announcement that VBA is considering the use of outside contractors for dependency claims instead of continuing to use the experienced VBA employees. VBA intends to begin the program in March. AFGE strongly urges Congress to prohibit this counterproductive and illegal solution to the claims backlog. Past evidence with other contracts, such as the ACS contract, demonstrates that contracts can actually add to the backlog. The ACS contract was canceled after only 9 months. It wasted VA resources and taxpayer money and forced veterans to wait longer for their benefits. Once again, I'd like to thank the committee for providing AFG the opportunity to share our views, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. And with that, I'll start a round of questions, giving each member 5 minutes. And my first question is actually for you, Mr. Jenkins. Just asking you to elaborate a little bit on HAMES and VBNS and how the integration isn't working that well.
I don't work with it directly. It usually is on the hospital side, VHA side, but dealing with VSRs who actually process the pre-development side, say that some of the information they're getting or some of the STRs, which are servicemen's treatment records, are not being uploaded properly, and sometimes they are mixed with one veteran and another veteran's information.
Okay. I know, problems we've been having, and obviously continues with your experience there. Next question, Mr. Minar. In your written testimony, you state you're concerned that over the past year, the focus of achieving the Secretary's goals of ending the backlog by 2015 and achieving 98% accuracy in the claims processing has taken on a life of its own, and that the goal is no longer to help all veterans, but create appearance of success by changing the playing field. I think this is a concern shared by me and this whole committee, and not just in the context of which arose in your written testimony. Can you please comment, 2 questions, can you please comment in your organization's experience how VA loses its sight of its mission to help veterans in favor of trying to present favorable image of the department? And you can please provide specific examples of how, as you noted, that the VA has changed the playing field in order to affect the appearance of success towards its goal of eliminating the backlog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with the second question first. Examples of how VA has changed the playing field. There have been many court cases, as well as VA regulations and I believe statute that requires VA to provide reasons and bases for the decisions that they make, especially when they are negative decisions. However, starting with a project that VA initiated 2.5 or 3 years ago, they removed a substantial part of reasons and bases out of rating decisions, and in the letters that are sent to claimants, they tell claimants basically conclusions. They don't explain the analysis or reasons why certain evidence was found to be wanting or substandard. They simply conclude that it was not sufficient to grant the benefit. This is an example of depriving veterans of the information they need in which to determine whether they should appeal a case. And as I mentioned earlier, appeals are now at 268,000, controlled by VA. That may account the lack of information that veterans receive when they have received decisions may very well account for some of those appeals. In addition, we have a recent example, the over 2-year-old case review project, a VA letter 2013-05 issued in April of last year, directed rating specialists to rate on the evidence of record. Now, 2-year-old claims and many 1-year-old claims are old. Many of them were old because they were difficult cases. They weren't able to get all the evidence that was necessary, and yet the VA blatantly told their rating specialists to to rate based on the evidence of record. In some cases, they issued what they called provisional ratings and left it up to the veteran to decide whether or not they would submit additional evidence throughout the year. If they failed to submit any more evidence, the decision became final. Many of these decisions were negative, or if not negative, not at the full benefit level that the individual might have obtained had they completed development. So these are just two examples of how VA has moved. In addition to all the things that we said about their proposal to change regulations to eliminate informal claims, to change the appeals process in this AO 81 that we talked about earlier.
So in your opinion, VA is less helpful to the veteran in changing the policy on how they respond?
They have decided, or so it appears, that it is much better for them if they can move cases quickly. They'll take less flack than if they continue the process of deliberately developing and acquiring the evidence necessary to make reasoned and substantial decisions. And it appears, as one of my colleagues pointed out, that VA is more and more moving to make changes, not by improving their performance, but by eliminating rights, policies or procedures that affect rights of veterans, so that they're making these changes, seeking to make improvement on the backs of veterans.
Thank you, Mr. Now with that, I recognize the ranking member, Ms. Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all of your concerns about the standardized form, and I know that Mr. Beto has some legislation on that. It's probably going to address it. So I'd just like to kind of turn my attention to the problem of transparency. I wonder if any of you or all of you would address the fact that as we move towards this national queue and as cases are moved from one regional office to another, what kinds of problems are you having tracking things, getting updates, getting information about the case for the veterans that you serve, and what recommendations do you have for making that better, because it looks like that's the way it's all moving? We can start at this end, maybe.
It's my understanding, ma'am, that it hasn't taken place yet. They're moving towards it, but the work queue has not formally.
That part is true, but they are already brokering claims
Yes,
from
ma'am.
one regional office to another.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
kind of a similar problem, I think. Maybe I'm wrong about
Yes,
that.
ma'am. Well, during the 2-year initiative, our regional office brokered quite a few claims. I started off in what was called Quick Start, which was a national mission. It was similar to Benefits on Delivery, BDD, if you might have heard of that. So many of the claims we were working, the 2-year-old claims, were brokered to other regional offices to speed up the process to help veterans get the benefits quicker. But in doing so, it left a void at our regional office once the 2-year-old initiative was finished. So that left individuals not having amount of work to work. So then we started working places that are in the service center, which we're still brokering cases to this day. And it leaves people wondering. We have many people saying, I don't have work today. I don't have anything. Although there is a backlog, you still have individuals saying, I don't have enough work for the day. I've even emailed my manager saying, I need work. I need something to do.
That's interesting. That's the opposite problem of kind of.
Yes, it's not an everyday thing, but it does happen.
Okay. What about from the veteran standpoint, when his case is brokered to some other place, and y'all's ability to help him track it or get information?
Well, I'll start. I don't know if anybody else wants to answer that, but with brokering claims, just looking at it from that aspect, is not inherently a bad thing. It's much worse in the paper form than it is in the electronic form, it would seem. Now, that would be because when you're taking a file and you're transferring the whole file, then I don't have access to that file if it's sitting in your VA regional office. So that's something that may be better in this particular electronic system that they're using. Dealing it from, or to answer your question from a veteran's standpoint, sure, veterans they contact us as a representative to find out answers. They contact the VA for the same answers, whether they have representation or they're calling on, without. And they'd like to speak to somebody in the RO which they filed the claim, or which they thought they filed the claim. But they may get somebody on the call center that's sitting in Cleveland when they filed their claim from New York City. So that was something that was very difficult to overcome and assist a veteran and let them know, when you call, you're not going to be speaking to somebody in this particular RO, unless you call our office as a representative. But when you call VA, you're going to be talking to somebody in another RO. That was a big problem for quite a while because, and it may be not that it resolved, but more along the lines that veterans just gave up. I'm not going to call there because I'm going to be talking to somebody from somewhere else. And I want to talk to somebody in the RO that's making my decision. That's what veterans like. That's something that's at risk with the national work, management model. And again, DAV would like to know more about what their plan is, and I understand that it may have been something that they used, in process of completing all of the oldest claims first, using kind of a brokering style. So whether the person's sitting in Reno, when the claim was filed on the East Coast, it's really not going to matter much on the VA end of it. But again, as my testimony points out, this is going to be at the risk of face-to-face service to veterans. And it seems like the more technology we have, the more fragmented that service to a veteran becomes.
Any comments?
If I might, one of the problems, one of the big problems that we see is that whenever VA develops a new software program, VBMS is the most recent example of this. Their focus is on getting a system up and running for VA claims processors and developers and all the people who are going to use it on the VA side. And it's almost as if service organizations are an afterthought. With this administration, certainly give them the credit. They've certainly given us more access. We have more interaction almost on a weekly basis than we've had under previous administrations. But still, what we lack today is a really functional work queue that we can manage our own work, look at cases that may have been brokered either electronically or in paper, finding information, or being given notice of decisions that have been made at other offices on cases that originated in our office is lacking. So VA has a long way to go, I think, before they can, before we can have this true partnership where we're working in sync together to help veterans with their claims.
Yeah, some of the problem, I think, is when you start talking about brokering claims out, you've got several issues. People who reside in states or locations where their regional office is managed effectively and things go on relatively smoothly, they almost feel like they're being punished because they're doing things well. But the other thing, too, is a lot of the work that in effective service or in effective regional offices, the relationship is what the important part is between the service officer and VA. If you have a claim now that's gone out to a different location clear across the country, that relationship's severed. When they went to this type of setup with pension and they had the consolidation models that occurred in Philadelphia and Minnesota and other places, that's one of the problems that our service officers felt, was that this relationship where I could go up a flight of steps, talk to a rater, and try to work something out that we differed about, just at the local level there, that's severed. And the other thing, too, when you're talking about national work queue, and this is something that we've talked about internally that we have specific concerns about, is that if you have a situation where a veteran is, let's say he's trying to get service connected or she's trying to get service connected for 4 or 5 conditions, and there's a way to maybe have these conditions interrelate with each other, and you're just looking at it and you're saying, this rater over here, you need to work on the feet. This rater over here, you're working on the ankles. This rater over here, you're working on the knees. And they're going to look on it as a direct service connection. But you can grant service connection for one of those conditions that could have caused or aggravated the other 2 conditions. If you've got this separated process, who's going to go back and look at this and say, well, these things could have either manifested secondary or have been aggravated by the service-connected condition that somebody at a different regional office granted?
Mr. Chairman, should we let him speak, or do we got to move on? Oh, thank you. My time is out, so I'll ask you to be brief.
Yes, very brief. One of the direct points I'd like to make, when you look at VA and controlling workload and shifting resources to different ROs to manage that workload, one thing I would like to point out is making sure a training initiative is set out, like as you discussed, PTSD, MST, TBI. If they're specialized areas or areas of concern, make sure that there's training initiatives, quality review process to make sure that the veteran or family member is getting the correct decision the first time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gentlelady. With that, I recognize Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if you could do me a favor, the whole panel. And, by the way, I want to thank you all for your service. The young Marine there, he'll kind of realize that with me, I always boil it down to the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Now, what we've been talking about, if you could bear with this dumb Marine up here right now, based upon what you say, and each one of you, I'm going to ask, and we'll put it in terms of combat ready or non-combat ready, what we're talking about. I'm getting the feeling that in most instances, this whole evolution, what we've been talking about is not combat ready. And I use that phrase because we're talking about so many people. So if you could kind of bear with me and just, I'm putting you on the spot, but, and by the way, you guys are right there with the troops. You hear what's going on, everything, and you're our eyes and ears. And so that's why I'm asking you to do it. So if you feel comfortable with making that rating, or you can do the old A, B, C, D, F, or what? Sir?
Well, as a Marine, I'd like to take this first. As you may be able to relate to it, a battalion commander doesn't do anything without talking to his sergeant major.
Absolutely.
And the way VBMS has been implemented, management saw this, but they did not speak to the people who are actually implementing it. And you cannot go to war unless your troops are ready. You can send something out there, but you're going to have a lot of body bags to fill.
Not combat ready?
Not combat ready.
Thank you. Sir?
And yes, I do agree with Mr. Jenkins as well, is you need to speak to the folks on the ground. You need to speak to the RVSRs. You need to speak to the VSRs. You need to speak to the folks on the ground to get the input, not only to go through some of the challenges with the system, but also make the system that much better. So I agree in the same analogy.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
The American Legion conducts regional office review visits periodically throughout the year, and we've heard similar concerns by service officers and also by employees within VA. So, I mean, as far as recent months, I can't say for certain if that shift has changed in opinion, but over the last year, I wouldn't say that it's combat ready at all, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, as you know, especially in combat, if you don't have effective communication, somebody's going to die. So from a combat-ready perspective, I would say this. There's a lot of positives going on in VA, as my testimony points out, but combat-ready and putting it in that terms, I wouldn't send it.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I have to agree with my colleagues. VA is doing it, despite the negative nature of my oral testimony. VA is doing many things simultaneously, and they're working hard. They're doing a lot more than any of their predecessors ever did. But we're not ready for prime time.
And by the way, I appreciate your candor, and to do this, that's a tough question to respond to, and as I said, I appreciate that. What I'd also like in the remaining time, not right now, but if your organizations that you represent, I don't want a 5-10 page analysis of this. I basically want something very, very simple. 5 things that are working correctly, 5 things that are not working correctly, and 5 recommendations. Now, as I said, no acronyms. If you can put it in military jargon, you're dealing with Paul Cook here. I'm not a rocket scientist. But by doing that, and I try to do this when I talk to veterans and what have you, And it's like you got to talk to the troops, and you got to put it in the language of the troops. And then you can do something in the language of the troops. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. With that, recognize Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to thank you and the ranking member for your leadership on this committee. The fact that we're hearing from all the folks who are in the front lines on these issues, the VSOs who are helping out their members and other veterans to make sure that they have the advocacy necessary to complete their claims, get a reasonable response in a reasonable amount of time, including coming up to Congress to testify, is greatly appreciated. Hearing from those who are actually working within the VA on the front lines is also appreciated. And then to have that followed up by our representatives from the VBA is great. So I really appreciate the format and the content of this hearing. And I want to follow up on Mr. Cook's request and just ask that as you respond to him, you respond to everyone on this committee. We could all benefit from the response and the experience and wisdom that you can share with us. So I look forward to getting that. I want to thank you for the very critical, but I think very constructive feedback on where we are with the VBA right now. And to Mr. Manar, I think you essentially made the point in your testimony that we're dealing within the confines of a zero-sum game. And so if we prioritize resources to resolving disability claims that are in need of a rating, we suffer in other key areas that the VBA is working on. And we can put more resources into that system, but ultimately we're going to have to prioritize, decide what's important and what we're going to follow and look at. And you gave some examples of, I believe if I'm quoting you correctly, dependency claims going from 40 to 235,000 outstanding. I'm looking at the IDES backlog for soldiers who are transitioning out, and I especially think of those who are at Fort Bliss and El Paso, Texas at the WTU, who are languishing when we have I believe a 15-day goal that is now averaging 143 days before we can get a response. So those are some other examples, but given that system, how would you better prioritize the work that VBA is doing? If it's not correct to prioritize disability claims awaiting ratings over these other areas, what is the best way to do this?
Thank you. First of all, it's important to recognize that until the last 5 or 6 years, 7 years, VBA was chronically shortchanged over decades in terms of staffing it needed to process claims. One of the reasons why the backlog, the workload in backlog grew in the 1990s and then accelerated after the turn of this century is because of staffing levels that existed at least back into the 70s. I hate to be a historian about that, but that's what brought us to this point in time, I think. Congress has done an awful lot to up the staffing of VA, and they've made a lot of progress because of the additional people, FTE, that you've given them, and all of us are grateful for that. More veterans have been served because of your actions than would have been without it. But that doesn't mean that VBA is staffed at the appropriate levels even now. Now we live in a world where there's tight budgets, and I doubt that you all can scrape together a whole lot more people to give to VA to process claims. But so to your question, what can VA do? It's a question of managing the workload. They have, in terms of appeals, they have designated decision review officers and support staff in each regional office. And yet, because of their drive to work over 2-year-old cases and then over 1-year-old cases, many of those people have not worked a significant number of appeals in, well, it's going on a year, more or less. The Board of Veterans Appeals is running out of appeals work to work because, as our staff at the board, because work is not flowing to the board. VA needs to release those people and let them get back to work. A business practice that's been ongoing, which caused this drastic increase in dependency claims. VA for decades had this policy that you could not complete couldn't close out an end product on a rating decision until you not only notified the veteran about what they were going to get, but you worked every issue that was related to that, including dependency. Well, what's been going on for the last 3 years is and it may have started in the regional offices, but it's never been corrected by central office to the best of my knowledge. And that what's been going on is that people have got to the point where they're notifying the veteran about the decision, and they just roll that dependency issue over into a separate end product, and they don't deal with it. They've got the evidence. In most cases, they've got the birth, the marriage dates and birth certificates and all the rest of the stuff that they need to pay benefits, but they just roll over for another day. And that accounts for a large number of those things. The problem is that managers aren't managing their work. They're being driven by the directives of central office. This is what you're going to do, and these are the goals that you're going to reach, and they're not allowed to do the things that they should have been trained to do, and many of them want to do, and that is to manage their work. In Reno, as an example, I learned just the other day that fully developed claims, which are supposed to be fast-tracked, average 263 days in Reno to be completed, and that if it's 1 or 2 issues, they'll put them in a fast-track lane. If it's 3 or more issues, then it just gets mixed in with the regular work. Well, what's the point of all of that? How does that help veterans? How does it help VA? You've got claims that are ready in many instances, ready to rate at that point to resolve, and yet you just throw them in the mix where they get older and older.
Mr. Menard, let me interrupt for just a minute, only
Sure.
because my time has expired, and it's obviously a question that deserves a longer answer than we have time to give today. And I would love ultimately to hear from everyone. If there's a second round of questioning, I'll pose that same question to everyone else. But I really would like to know whether because you spoke a lot about process improvements, whether there is any wisdom to prioritizing certain workload over other workload within the VBA, as it appears that we're doing, to the point that you made earlier, or whether it can be handled through other means. And so look forward to getting that back from the other panelists, and also your recommendations per Mr. Cook's request. And with that, I'll yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. With that, recognize Mr. Ruiz.
I would like, first of all, thank you all for coming here and for being so honest in your assessment and willing to roll up your sleeves and get this fixed. At this point, I can yield my time to Beto O'Rourke so that you can get your answers from the other members.
I appreciate that. Thank you. If the other members of the panel would like to answer that question about prioritization of certain claims or work activities within the VBA over others, love to get your answer. Thank you.
Last year, the American Legion started working pretty heavily with VA and the White House on this FDC process. And one of the things that we discovered when we would go out to these different regional offices, and it was a common line that was used, whether it was in Indianapolis or Oakland or Nashville, was if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. That was a line from the employees. That wasn't a line from a VSO. It wasn't a line from a Department of Service officer. So there appears to be some consternation, and maybe Mr. Jenkins can explain that a little bit further too, that even internally that there isn't a recognition. We believe, and we have bought in on this fully developed claim process. However, if, like what Mr. Menard said, if it's going to go into a 235-day shoot to get the claim done, then it serves nobody any good. I mean, as far as we're concerned, if the veteran is giving everything to VA to rate the claim and it's ready to go ahead and make that a priority. I'm really kind of surprised that it has expanded to that point in roughly 12, 14 months. Thank you.
Just elaborate on one thing that Zach had said, and that is, the FDC program, it's probably one of the more exciting things happening that's making a positive difference. And you can look directly at the Chicago VA regional office and see the timelines and how long it takes for a claim. At the same time, you know, I think VA's overall is so somewhere near 25% of all claims are fully developed. But let's not forget, they're fully developed because of the veteran and because of the VSOs. So we're doing a lot of the legwork, the majority of it, and presenting it to the VA where it makes their job much easier. We're happy to do that. We hope to gain even more of that. And DAV, our number of FDC claims is increasing more. I mean, that's what we do, educate the client or the veteran to make sure that they know the most advantageous way to help them navigate the system, number one, but also tell them, listen, if you can do all of this, you're not going to have a year to wait. You'll be much quicker in your decision, maybe 120 days, depending on that RO. So that is something that needs to be constantly promoted, not just through the VSOs to the people that we serve, but VA needs to do a much better job in getting that message out.
I don't know if anyone else would like to comment. I do want to follow up on your remarks by saying that we had hoped that the VA would elect to administratively implement the Faster Filing Act, which recently passed the House of Representatives, which require them to notify veterans and VSOs that are assisting them in filing their claims of the fastest response time based on the different kind of claims you choose. So I don't like the new rulemaking from the VBA, and I don't like this forcing veterans and VSOs to use these standardized forms. I believe in empowering the VSOs and the veterans with the information being perfectly transparent and allowing them to make the decision that is in their best interest, given what they're willing to do, realizing the average wait times. In El Paso, where we recently had wait times up to 470 days to hear back from the Waco Regional Office, it's now down much lower than that. We wanted to be able to tell veterans, if you file a fully developed claim and you file it online, you can get that back in under 100 days on average, and you're eligible for a full year's retroactive benefits. I'd love the VA to do a much better, more aggressive job of pushing that information out there. If we can't get them to do it administratively, we hope that will become law soon and do exactly what you're asking us to do. I've got about 30 seconds left on Mr. Ruiz's time for anyone who'd like to add.
Yes, I'd like to, and what you just were discussing is honor empowering and embracing the warriors and the veterans as we forward face and helping them with claims. When you're actually out there as helping a warrior with a fully developed claim or guiding them through the process and teaching them how to navigate and understand the process, that's where you're going to get more buy-in and the claims are going to be done a lot quicker. When folks, as you see in Houston, when they reached out to a number of folks regarding appeals to clarify issues, to be that forward-facing, veteran-centric focus, they were able to reduce timeliness because now the veteran understands the process, the evidence needed, they work hand in hand, not creating a process that's separate and distinct.
Thank you, and thank you for the responses. It looks like the time has elapsed. I guess parliamentary speaking, I yield back to Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back in the essence of time and getting to the next panel. I'm going to ask all members to submit any additional questions for the record, and we'll ask the gentleman to please respond in a timely manner, and also please respond to the subcommittee with Mr. Cook's request, and we'd like to get that to all of our members here. So with that, thank you all for your testimony and your service, and you are now excused, and we welcome the second panel to the table. At this time, I welcome panel 2, including Ms. Diana Rubens, Deputy Undersecretary for Field Operations, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, accompanied by both Mr. Richard Hippolyte, Assistant General Counsel, and Ms. Lorraine Lanfried, Deputy Chief Information Officer for Product Development. I also welcome Major General Richard Thomas, Director of Healthcare Operations, the Department of Defense Agency, or Departments of Health Agency, who is accompanied by Mr. David Bowen, Director of Health Information Technology. We appreciate all of your attendance here today. Your complete and written statement will be entered into the hearing record. And Ms. Rubens, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your oral testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Titus, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss VA's transformation initiatives. I'd like to start by providing an update on our progress in eliminating the backlog. During FY13, VA completed a record 1.17 million claims with a 90% accuracy at the claim level and 96% accuracy at the medical issue level. Since its peak in March of 2013, the backlog has been reduced by 35%, and the overall inventory has been reduced by 22%. Also important, the average number of days rating claims have been pending has also been reduced, meaning that today veterans are waiting 111 days fewer than they were last year at this time for a decision. None of this progress would be possible without the tremendous support from our partners, including this subcommittee, the remainder of Congress, our veteran service organizations, and of course, our unprecedented effort and dedication of the VBA employees, 52% of whom are veterans themselves. I'd like to update you on a few key initiatives. Our Veterans Relationship Management initiative is providing veterans with seamless, secure, and on-demand access to benefits information and services. Veterans now have improved access to benefits information from multiple channels, on the phone, online, and through our shared VA DoD portal called eBenefits. From FY09 to 13, the number of contacts with VA through these channels increased from 9.1 million to 56.3 million. Currently, VA has over 3.3 million eBenefits users, representing a 51% increase from FY12. Our Stakeholder Enterprise Portal is a secure web-based entry point that complements eBenefits and gives VSOs access to assist veterans with electronic claim submissions. Over 1,200 registered users across 75 organizations can check the status of claims, review payment history, and upload documentation on behalf of the veterans they represent, all within a digital environment. And our Digits to Digits initiative, scheduled for implementation this fiscal year, will enable VSOs to submit claims directly using their own claims management systems. Our Veterans Benefits Management System was deployed 6 months ahead of schedule in June of 2013. After development over the course of 18 months with side-by-side end users and our SMEs with programmers, we continue to monitor and solicit feedback from partners as well as end users. In December of 13, VBMS entered Generation 3 of our system development, increasing system functionality, adding more complex automation capabilities, reducing dependency on legacy systems, and enabling the capability to accept veterans' electronic service treatment records from DoD through HAMES so that STRs will be available for service members separated after January 1st, 2014, when they file their claims. VBA also established our Veterans Claims Intake Program to streamline the process for receiving paper records and data in VBMS. As of January 10th of this year, VSIP had converted from paper and uploaded into VBMS more than 430 million images. As I turn to our national work queue, VA transitioning into a paperless process, we are in a better position to adopt a national workload strategy that is boundary-free and improve our capacity to serve veterans. In April of 2013, VBA's oldest claims initiative aimed at expediting decisions for veterans who had waited the longest. We redistributed claims across the nation to best utilize resources of all regional offices. The success of this initiative demonstrates the potential for a national workload management strategy by optimizing every member of our VBA workforce. Our national work queue is being developed in a two-phased approach. In phase 1, claims will be managed from a central location and routed based on individual station capacity, with the first filter for a claim being the one in which the state where the veteran resides, as well as other national priorities. In phase 2, claims can be routed to individual employees based on the nature of the claim and the skill set of the claims processor. Our employee performance standards are routinely evaluated and revised to keep pace with changes in process and technology. With VBA's transition to electronic claims processing, it is more important than ever to consider the impact of technology on employee performance and ensure that the expectations of our workforce align with the tools employees have to complete their work. Revised standards were most recently implemented in 2013, and a further revision to VSR and rating VSR standards were last week presented to our national labor partners and is in the final stages prior to implementation. A recently proposed rule is intended to get benefits to veterans quickly with the most accurate decision possible. The rule would require claims to be filed on a standard form and would require appeals to be initiated using a standard form whenever one is provided for that purpose. The proposed rule does not require veterans file electronic claims in order to receive benefits. VA gave interested members of the public the opportunity to comment on the proposed rule from October 30th through December 30th. We are currently carefully reviewing the 53 comments that we've received from stakeholders and will be responding to them in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act. While we know there's more work to be done to reach our goals, we know that the gains we are making in information technology and automation of our processes are critical. And going forward, we will need to sustain the resources for programs like VBMS in order to eliminate our backlog in 2015 and achieve our quality goals. This concludes my statement, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you or other members may have.
Thank you, Ms. Rubens. With that, recognize General Thomas for his testimony.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Titus, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Department's successful implementation of a new capability which claims adjudicators may electronically request and receive complete electronic DoD service treatment records, or STRs, for newly separated service members. I'd also like to recognize and thank the previous panel members, the VSO members, for their continuing service to our country. I'm accompanied today by Mr. Dave Bowen, to my left, the Chief Information Officer for the Military Health System, and this oral statement is provided on behalf of both Mr. Bowen and myself. Just last month, the DoD delivered on our commitment to make certified complete electronic STRs available in support of the Veterans Benefits Administration's transition to a fully digital environment for claims processing. We're now providing the VA with access to electronic STRs for service members who separated or were discharged after January 1st, 2014 in our Health Artifact and Image Management Solution, or the HAMES repository. Now, to achieve this goal, the DoD significantly revised our HAMES deployment strategy. Working closely with our VA partners, the DoD established a Tiger team of experts to plan and develop the required secure system interface needed to allow the VA to query the HAMES repository for relevant STRs. Now, this Tiger team is critical to ensure that the resulting solution would align with the disability benefits claims adjudication workflow. Now, the process for digitizing a service member's STR and making it retrievable by the VBA begins with the DoD personnel scanning any paper-based elements of a newly separating service member's service treatment record. The digitized STR, comprised of both scanned information and existing digital content from the service member's DoD electronic health record, is then submitted into the HAMES repository and made available to the VA as a single record. When a separated service member or veteran files a claim, a VBA claims adjudicator then establishes a claim in the Veterans Benefit Management System. The system initiates an automated request for the STR, and when the requested record has been located and retrieved, the system alerts the claims adjudicator that the STR is available to support the claims process. The process I just described supports probably the most important contribution the DoD makes to the VA's effort to expedite the claims processing for our veterans. By providing the VA with a complete certified electronic STRs at the point of a service member separation, the DoD helps to ensure the claims adjudicators have the military service-related health care evidence needed to adjudicate a VA disability claim. And we're quite pleased with the successful and ongoing collaboration with our VA colleagues to deliver this needed service to our veterans. Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Titus, and distinguished subcommittee members, this concludes my oral statement. Mr. Bowen and I would be happy to answer any questions that you or the subcommittee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, General Thomas. And with that, we'll start a round of questioning. And my first question is for Mrs. Rubens. Although in your introduction, your testimony, you note that veterans may submit claims electronically through eBenefits website, you gloss over the recent eBenefits system defect in which thousands of veterans may have had their personal information broadcast to other users. I have like 3 questions here, and I'll ask them one at a time and get your response. Have there been any other problems, such as outages, glitches, or information compromises associated with the VA's eBenefits portal since the most recent breach of the veteran's personal information on January 15th of 2014? And I know for a fact yesterday there was actually an outage of eBenefits because I received it about 4:40, 4:45 last night. So I'd like to see your response to that question.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Obviously, we take very seriously the security of our personally identifiable information of our veterans. Ms. Landfried is prepared to speak to the specifics of last week, but I will tell you that we continue to work very closely from a business and OIT side as we identify these kinds of issues. Ms. Landfried?
Thank you. First, before I start, I would like to apologize to any service member, any veteran, or their family member who may have had their information viewed by another veteran who was on the system on the evening of January 15th. We hold ourselves to a very high standard in the Office of Information Technology, and during that incident, we did not meet that standard. The specifics of what happened, we were doing an update to a system that feeds into eBenefits. We completed the update. After we installed, we verified to see if it's working. During that verification, we discovered that users on the system were able to see information about other users. As soon as we found out that the newly installed software was the cause, we removed that software from the system and verified that the potential to see another person's information while you're reviewing your own no longer existed. Then, as a further precaution, we took the eBenefits system offline so that we could do a review end-to-end to make sure that there weren't any other vulnerabilities. We waited until that Sunday morning to bring the system back online, working with our VBA colleagues to make sure that when we did bring the system online, that the VBA call center was staffed, even though it was on a weekend, just in case any of the veterans using the system coming back online had any questions or concerns or saw anything out of the ordinary.
Have there been any other issues? The committee received notification of an outage as of last night. So what are the other issues?
So the incident last night, although eBenefits was impacted, it was actually an issue at the Austin Data Center with domain controllers. And so if users were able to refresh their browser a few times, that's when the issue cleared. And so the duration of the impact really was dependent on how long it took for that to reset. So it wasn't with the benefits system themselves, but to an end user, that doesn't really matter because they weren't able to get to the system at the exact time that they needed it.
A department official also stated that up to 5,351 people may have been affected by this defect. How was this number determined, and is VA confident that this number is accurate?
Sure, I'll take that. Yeah, I am confident that that number is accurate. Whenever there's an incident, as I explained, the first thing we look at is what was the cause, so that we can get systems back and operational for VBA and our veterans. As soon as we did that and determined that we had stopped the problem, we then examined all of our audit logs so that we could determine exactly who was on the system at the time that the incident occurred and what functions they were using, because the problem was contained to 4 or 5 functions on the system. So it wasn't every system or every function that you could get to on the eBenefits portal. So I'm confident in that number because that's the maximum number of people who are on the system at that time. So they were the maximum number of people who could have potentially viewed another veteran's information. The actual number of, according to all of the logs that have been examined at this point, the actual number of veterans whose information was potentially seen by another veteran on the system was 1,362. I failed to mention before that, whenever there is a potential PII loss, there's two things that we do with the department. One is, we communicate it, we notify Congress, we work with our VSO partners to get the message out to them. I put out a blog post, and then in parallel, we have a data breach core team that looks at to make sure that all of the material is complete, and then determines what the remediation should be for the people that were potentially impacted.
Thank you. With that, I'll recognize the ranking member, Ms. Titus.
Thank you. I'd like to continue that, Ms. Lanford, if you don't mind. I appreciate what you do when a problem like that happens, but I would ask you two things. One is, has that data breach team completed its investigation and made any recommendations, and what safety provisions have you put in place to keep this from happening again?
Sure. So first of all, the data breach core team is wrapping up their review, and they have begun the notification process. So letters have started going out to the impacted people, and part of the remediation that's being offered is how to get free credit monitoring in the event that any of the information that was viewed by other people in the system falls into the wrong hands. In terms of how we respond to the event, as Ms. Rubin said, we take very seriously our obligation to protect veterans and their personal information as if it were our own. So we have a multi-layered defense in place to combat, whatever the issue might be. That includes monitoring outside the VA network by external partners, monitoring internally of the VA network, monitoring of our servers, our applications, as well as desktop devices. All of, so it's sort of a defense in depth type of strategy to make sure that information is protected to the best of our ability.
So is it just back to business as usual, or are you putting in place something new to keep this problem from recurring?
So with this particular problem, it was a combination of events that happened. There was the software that we put in that didn't behave, that caused e-benefits to expose information that it should have. So we've put additional error handling in e-benefits to make sure that, should it ever see that same error condition, that we won't have that same condition. We've also reviewed all of our other applications that have similar features to make sure that they also have appropriate error handling in case they ever encounter this problem.
Thank you. And then I'll go back to my previous problem, which is the brokering of cases. I know in Reno, 5,000 cases have been brokered to other places around the country. And my question is that's kind of lipstick on a pig. I mean, you're dealing with the symptoms, but not the causes of the problem. Now, in the short term, those 5,000 cases may get decided quicker, but still there's a problem at the Reno office if they couldn't handle it. Also, I wonder, does a case have to get to be stale or get to sit around for a long time or almost be at the status of being part of the backlog before it's brokered? Reno's not going to be able to do it. Why don't you just broker those cases up front and then figure out some way to fix the Reno um Would you address that for me?
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. I understand your concern that brokering them out isn't necessarily addressing the issues that we've got in Reno, and I want to assure you that we're doing two things. First and foremost, obviously, is working to get veterans who've been waiting the longest their decisions. And at the same time, working with the Reno Regional Office to ensure that we are maximizing the efficiency and ensuring the accountability throughout the chain so that the work being done in Reno continues to work. They've got great quality today, but also work to improve timeliness and output to ensure that they are capable of providing the service to the veterans of Nevada. We will continue to use that approach so that we're, one, taking care of veterans, and two, ensuring that the systems that are in place in Reno are working the way that they should to improve the output and the performance of the Reno Regional Office itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. With that, recognize Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Rubens, thank you for your answer so far and for being responsive to me and to our office, accompanying us to the Waco Regional Office to look at the backlog issue there, which, as I noted earlier, has gone from something like 470 days on average to, I guess, close to 250, which is not yet where it should be, but much better than where it was. And so we hope that it continues to move in that direction. I have three questions that I'm hope to be able to get you to answer today. The first, there's so many issues brought up by the representatives from the VSOs and the gentleman from the FGE, but one that I want to focus on is the assertion made by Mr. Menard that in prioritizing disability claims that need to be rated, we are not committing the necessary resources to take care of other critical VBA responsibilities. He mentioned a few, I mentioned a few in my response to him. Could you comment on that and let us know whether or not that is the case?
Thank you, sir. And I would tell you that as we are prioritizing not only the aging claims, I'll remind us all that we also established, of course, those priorities for the Congressional Medal of Honor recipients, our former POWs, homeless, terminal, extreme financial hardship, as well as our fully developed claims, in an effort to ensure that we are addressing all of those. When you talk about the fact that we had a record year for claims processed in the rating bundle, I would draw to your attention that we've also had a record year for the number of non-rating claims that we completed. And so I would tell you that we are continuing to work, whether it's across non-rating, the appeals work, to ensure we are accomplishing work across the spectrum. I know we talked at some length about where we're at with our IDES work. I would tell you that VBA has also worked to improve the outcomes on behalf of those service members going through the IDES program. Our Seattle Regional Office is processing for the Army. We have added resources, 180 folks last year, and of those we recently promoted and sent to training another 36 rating specialists who are going to make those decisions on the claims of the both preliminary and final ratings and the decisions, working with the Army to agree on our approach as to how we work those claims. And so we are taking a holistic approach and working all of the veterans' claims.
So if I could just summarize it to a one-word answer, it would be no. We're not suffering in other areas for prioritizing the disability claims and the other issues that you raised.
Correct.
Okay. How would you then explain how far off the mark we are when it comes to IDES? And I realize the steps that you just outlined that you're going to take to rectify the problem, but if our goal is 15 days and we're at 143 days, how did that happen, and how soon, or can you make a commitment to the date on which we'll be back to 15 days or get to 15 days in the first place?
So I would tell you that the outcome of being as far behind as we are is a number of issues, to include our inability to keep up with the surges in work that we began to receive through the IDES program. As we made those adjustments, our ability to turn claims processors from other work and into the IDES work and get them trained up is something that has taken us some time. We are very much engaged in doing that. We have plans in place that will get us for both prelim and final decisions caught up by March and October of this year, in conjunction with the agreement that we've got with the Army. I have continued to have regular and ongoing calls with our folks in Seattle to ensure that we are working to those goals, and we continue to anticipate meeting them. We've also used some resources from our Providence IDES processing center to help back down that time and age for our Army participants in the IDES program.
And to put a point to it, we'll be at 15 days on what date?
So I guess the 15 days, if I recall, really is the upfront component. And there are pieces of the IDES program that start with the claims intake, the getting the exam accomplished, and I'd like to make sure I'm referring to the right target of 15 days with you so that I'm not misleading you.
I'm looking at, so you have, the VA has two parts of this, the Department of Defense has the rest. I'm looking at the VA rating, which is one of those parts, which the first VA rating, which has a goal of 15 days. The actual in the case that we're looking at is 191 days. Your average, the Army average, is 143 days. That's the one I want to know when we're going to be able to get to our goal.
So as we work to the agreement with the Army about which we would, I'll say, tackle first, we determined that we would complete the final rating initially. Those are those service members who have got not only the preliminary from us, but finished the work with the Army on the MEB-PEB process. That target is March, and it is August of this year that we are targeting the preliminary rating in 15 days.
Okay. And then we won't have time for your response because I've run out of time, so I'll just pose my third question as an appeal. You heard from the VSOs in terms of their feelings about the standardized form, and I understand the logic behind implementing that and the rule, but I think you've heard about the discomfort and distress and the disservice that we might end up doing to our veterans with that rule. So I would appeal to you to use something like the Faster Filing Act, allow veterans, VSOs to file a claim in whichever way they think is best, but make sure that we're very transparent with the information about how soon that claim is likely to be resolved based on current trends, which again, you could elect to implement administratively. The VA has chosen not to, so the legislation's passed the House. Before that becomes mandated by law, we just appeal to you to implement that administratively. I think that could do a world of good given how much harm we fear this rule may do. So with that, I'll yield back to the chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. With that, recognize Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you all for coming today, and thank you for your efforts in trying to fix this problem. I'm interested in the e-benefits program and initiative, and I'm assuming that this program will allow users to file and follow their claims from their own home, correct?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Rubens, okay. So the whole purpose is to have our veterans log on, and so they can get, so they can have an easier way to file and follow their claims. So what are we doing? What are you doing to train and educate our veterans and our volunteer veteran service officers and those in the community who work with veterans to utilize this e-benefits, and how is it getting all the way from all the way into the community at the grassroots level?
Terrific. Thank you very much. And yes, in fact, we believe that e-benefits is going to give us that, and our veterans, frankly, that simpler process for them to come in online, upload documents, check their status of claims, as well as 58 other self-service initiatives. As we work to get the word out, frankly, it's been an across-the-board push, educating, starting here with members of the committee and staff, with our VSO partners, and press releases, as well as information that we regularly post up online. Any outreach event, frankly, sir, that we go to, we also have members, whether it's from our Benefits Assistance Service here in Washington or our regional offices across the country, out at those outreach events with an e-benefits site, working to get folks informed about e-benefits, and for those that aren't, registered for a premium account so that they can, in fact, make use of all of those online services.
A lot of our veterans are more senior and not very computer savvy. So they would require some hands-on training walking through with computers. Do you have those training workshops, not just lectures or panels or flyers, but actual training for veterans?
So I would refer back to the veterans who participate in our outreach events. If they come in, we'll work with them to show them, whether that's at an outreach event or in our regional office, to show them how to get into e-benefits and use it. I would tell you we're very much engaged, and our VSO partners have been awesome in helping to ensure knowledge about e-benefits and utilizing e-benefits is there. Also, for our veterans who are not computer literate, as we continue to build that functionality for our stakeholder enterprise portal, it will allow our VSO partners who hold power of attorney for those veterans to come in and submit claims online on behalf of those veterans who are not computer friendly.
Now, we're starting a veterans university in our district where we're going to train and educate a lot of our veterans and our veteran service officers in the area to really help them learn the system and learn what they qualify for and train them on how to help other veterans. I would like to invite your experts into the districts to do a series of these for our VFWs, our American Legion, and our other VSOs and our veterans in my district so that we can help them access their claims better.
Wonderful. We'd like to be at any outreach event you might hold.
Okay?
Great.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Thank you, gentlemen. With that, I'm actually going to have another round of questions. We're going to have votes here pending here in the next 5-10 minutes maybe. I have actually two questions, one for Ms. Rubens and one for General Thomas, and I'll start with Ms. Rubens because some of the VSO testimony contradicts some of the things you actually said in your opening statement, and all of the VSOs had testimony that contained some negative feedback on the proposed rule to require the use of standardized claims forms. In part, some of these concerns include elimination of all informal claims, the creation of new arbitrary burden on claimants to submit a completed claim, and advancing the concept that the VA will not work a claim until the veteran complies with certain bureaucratic hurdles. Can you explain from the department's perspective how this new rule would benefit the veteran?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will start, and if Mr. Hippolyte has something to add, I'll turn to him. I would tell you that organizationally, VBA continues to look at how do we gain efficiencies in processing claims, because we think that will help us process claims more quickly and to a higher degree of quality for our veterans if we can readily identify the veteran, the issues claimed, and evidence that's either available or attached. To that end, we have gone through the regulation proposal. We have gathered 53 sets of comments, many from our VSO partners, and many with great thoughtful information that we are going to cull through very closely. And as we work to publish the final rule, obviously we'll work to address every one of those comments. Mr. Hippolyte, is there something that you might add to that?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, while the proposed regulation would do away with the term informal claim, there's still certain aspects of the old system that would be preserved in the rule to the benefit of veterans, particularly in the electronic filing environment. If a veteran comes in and starts to develop a claim and has what we'd call an incomplete claim under the rule, that would still serve to preserve their effective date. We've also made it clear, too, that in cases where there's medical evidence that would allow an increase in benefits, that you know, a VA exam or whatever could be the date of a placeholder that could then be the basis for an effective date if the veteran came in and filed a claim within a year. So some aspects of the old system are still preserved, even though the term informal claim is no longer used. As was mentioned, though, that a lot of the VSOs did have concerns about the impact of the rule. There will be changes under what's been proposed if that is finalized. So we greatly appreciate receiving those comments. We're in the process of analyzing those in depth now, and we're going to certainly take those into account moving forward.
I just asked that question just to, obviously you're going through the process, but to make sure, obviously, every single VSO that sat up there had a concern about it. I think Mr. Hippolyte, you addressed it, and Ms. Rubens, you've addressed it a little bit, but it is a concern that they all have. And just make sure when you go through the process that you're weighing that the way it needs to be weighed. My next question is for General Thomas. Although both DOD and VA state in written testimony that the deadline for implementing HAMS transfer of digital STRs to the VA was met, that the recent oversight visit, subcommittee staff was informed that there had been some complications with the rollout. Can you detail these complications in the state state what has been done, and then state what has been done to fix those problems?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I think, you know, the initial rollout here is really get the system to IOC, or initial operating capability. They have goals and milestones to get to FOC, and there's a targeted date for that. Now, I know that specifically there were some issues working with the VA here to address a certain timeout issue affecting the subscription service to obtain or to retrieve the full service treatment record. And I'll defer to Mr. Bowen if you want to give any more specific details about complications.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, we do have some issues we're working through. They're involved around some of our workflow processes on the DoD side still needing to be refined. I know we've had one instance where a document was misclassified, and so it showed up in the wrong section of the service record that transferred over to the VA, but nonetheless was there. The system worked as planned. We just put the document into the wrong section, so we're working on that. We have some issues around duplicate records showing up on the VA side. We're working through those issues. We believe that that may be a user education issue on the VA where the claim is actually requested multiple times. So working through that, teams are meeting, looking at the details of all of these issues. We're logging them, we're tracking them, and the teams are meeting every single day to work through these issues, research the problems, and get them resolved.
Thank you. Ms. Titus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask Ms. Rubens, how station targets are set for VA regional offices? And we've discovered, of course, especially in Reno, that these aren't being met. And I wonder if those targets are realistic and what happens to hold offices accountable that don't meet those targets.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Targets are based on the resources within each regional office, the expectation that a resource from one office will be equivalent to the resources in another office. And so from one RO to another, it's based on how many individuals they have working within the service center to make decisions. And I would tell you that any instance where a regional office is not meeting its targets, feedback is ongoing and that appropriate accountability measures are taken.
Thank the gentlelady, and thank all of you for being here today with us today. And the panel is excused, and I appreciate the time and attention that went into preparing your remarks for today. VBA is moving forward in a positive direction with technological updates to its processes, but it is obvious that there will be continuing to have growing pains along the way. It is frustrating when the department delivers a message that everything is going as planned when we know that that is not always the case. Accordingly, I will ask you all to again keep communication open with this subcommittee. And I also ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material. Hearing no objections, so ordered. I thank the members for their attendance today, and this hearing is now adjourned.